Hello, everyone, and welcome to another exciting version of Chip Talks podcast. Today, we're going to talk about the endocannabinoid system, and we're going to kind of dial this back to the most basic level, let's say, of the endocannabinoid system. We're going to talk about what this system is, and I'm going to give you some analogies that I hope will make sense, and I hope that this will be understandable. You know, something that you could play for your children to understand this system. I really want to make it that basic. And we'll get into some more complicated science as I talk through all this. But the basic understandings of this system are, cognitively, anybody should be able to understand this. It's pretty easy. The thing that you have to fight is all of our programming, all of the stuff that you've been taught that is just kind of wrong or misleading. So if you can approach this, and if you can approach, let's say, the endocannabinoid system, or approach this talk I'm about to give with an open mind, I think it'll blow you away. It really will. It'll stun you. It'll shock you. The magnificence of this system, its involvement in almost everything, and how it responds to nature. And so our ability to manipulate this system, allows us to manipulate you and me, ourselves, without any doctors or any, prescription medications or any, stuff you got to pay for, right? Stuff you can grow in your backyard, which is cool. And that's why it's so important to study. And that's why it's also so threatening to the powers that be, let's say, because again, if I can give you all the power, then why do you need to buy my medicine or go to my hospital or, participate in my even vitamin system or, Walgreens system, right? You can just grow your own stuff. You can just fix yourself, which is cool. So let's talk about this, because to me, this is the bridge that we're looking for. A lot of us have thought, well, the pharmaceutical system and medicine's kind of wrong, and there's got to be a better way. And a lot of us have found nature and have found things like omega-3s and, stuff from nature that really helps us. But no one's really recognized why. Is it because we have this master system that somehow we're depriving with our current behavior, and that just by adding some nature that we can enhance this system and it might cause us to thrive? It's certainly looking that way. But that's very threatening to, let's say, the powers that be and the current business models that enslave us, frankly. So how do we break this down? How do we build a new system? How do we get this information and knowledge kind of out to the general population? Well, that's what we want to do, and that's what I'm trying to do with just by educating you. Because again, if I can educate you about this system and you go educate your doctor, or if you are a doctor and you go educate your peers, or if you're a PhD and you go educate your peers, again, it doesn't matter what is in curriculum. It doesn't matter really, what other people try to force upon us. We'll be able to disseminate this knowledge between us without a system, which is what I hope to accomplish. So anyway, endocannabinoid system, what's it all about? What does it do? Well, let's look at some analogies, because this just helps stuff. When I say it's your master regulatory system, that just kind of, for me, it's like, oh, okay, well, tell me more about it. So I kind of ignore that. But what does it mean, my master regulatory system? That's a pretty important and broad statement, isn't it? So let's talk that through a little bit. Let's talk through what it means to have a master regulatory system and kind of what that might look like. All right. So we all understand let's talk about how old the system is first, because it's super old. Your cells are likely kind of this amalgamation of, let's say, evolutionary development, without going down the Darwin rabbit hole. But, it looks like at some point a cell swallowed, let's say, something called the mitochondria, and then that cell now had a new way to produce energy, and that kind of stuck because it was evolutionarily better. And that's how we get an erythrocyte cell that has mitochondria in it that can produce energy by oxidative phosphorylation rather than fermenting basically glucose, right? So stuff like that has happened in the past. Now, the only reason that I say that is because literally at the point that happened, Well, guess what? Mitochondria have a CB1 neuroreceptor on them. So they had an endocannabinoid system that was addressable now by this bigger cell that had an endocannabinoid system. So every erythrocyte type cell will express a CB1 neuroreceptor. So what I'm saying is, at the point where we developed these erythrocyte type cells, we likely had a functioning endocannabinoid system within those cells. If you go back to life, it really is the first life to develop a spine. So a thing called sea squirt is a sponge, but its larva stage has a little tail, and the larva stage had an endocannabinoid system. So at the time he developed something for motility, a tail, he developed an endocannabinoid system. So again, that's how common it is. If you have a bird, if you have a cat, if you have a lizard, if you have a worm, they all have an endocannabinoid system, or a rudimentary endocannabinoid system. So almost all life on a worm may not. Let me retract that one. Because he's an insect. I don't know if a worm does, but anything with a spine will. All right. So, and that's, most life on the planet. So it's very common. The endocannabinoid system is very common. It's not something that only we have that's modulated by marijuana. It's very common to most life on the planet. Well, okay, so now let's talk about master regulatory. What does that mean? Well, I like to use the analogy of a car. So I like to use the analogy of a vehicle, because we work very much like our car, and we don't think about ourselves in this way. We don't kind of, logically, let's say, deconstruct ourselves in this way, but we need to, because it's important to how we function. So we work kind of like a vehicle, all right? And what do I mean by that? Well, we all understand that our cars have a computer, right? And our cars, in that computer, is using the electrical kind of sensor array to look at what's going on in the vehicle. It's checking, exhaust. It's checking how much gas is left. It's checking, the efficiency of the pistons and, all that kind of stuff, right? But we're constantly monitoring that vehicle. And that computer is making decisions. It's saying, oh, we're a little off on our exhaust, and maybe, we're a little too lean in our carburation. So let's make some adjustments. And again, through that same sensor array, adjustments are made in order to bring that vehicle to perfect function. So perfect function of getting the most gas and gas mileage out of that vehicle, perfect function as the electrical stuff, air conditioning, environment, everything, right? So that computer is always watching all these different systems and trying to balance them using this sensor array and electrical array. Well, guess what? You work in very similar fashion. Computer, hypothalamus, hippocampus, is using the endocannabinoid system as a sensor array, but also as a mechanism of action in order to make changes in you. So if you're running a little hot and you need to run a little cooler, well, the air conditioner's got to come on. And again, that happens. Hypothalamus, hippocampus senses that, uses the endocannabinoid system to make those changes. You may need nutrients. Again, how does that happen? Boom, boom. There's certain times when that's more advantageous. Eating is a whole big several chip talks that we'll do on our own. But anyway, the endocannabinoid system is involved through this sort of sensor and, mechanism of change, mechanism of action around our major systems, right? So our temperature system, our immune system, our feeding, eating, craving systems, our reward systems, all those systems are subjugated and managed by the endocannabinoid system. Okay, so it's pretty dang important. This is just an observational thing, but again, this system works very close to nature, and things that live very close to nature, like, things in the wild, like a bunny in the wild or a deer in the wild. So those things certainly have, let's say, threats and dangers, but they're mainly from predators. Those things don't die the way we die. I mean, you don't die by getting eaten by a bear. You don't have to worry about that every day. Your primary survival instinct isn't, I think I need to avoid being eaten by a bear today, right? We die of disease. Well, there is no disease in nature. Things may occasionally get a cancer or something, but I mean, the incidence, you don't see a deer with IBS. You don't see a deer with Crohn's disease. Do you see a deer with autoimmunes? It just doesn't happen. So you've been mind controlled, boys and girls, and we've moved so far away from nature, but let's say so far away from this endocannabinoid system that we've lost our way. And who's led us there? And you can draw your own conclusions there, but it's pretty obvious who's led us there. But we need to come back. We need to come back to nature. We need to understand this system, and we need to understand how close it is to nature and how nature impacts it. But that's really cool, isn't it? Isn't that good news? Because what does that mean? That means that I can use nature to impact this system. Wow. And that's what we figured out in 2016. Again, we wanted to kind of make a living, let's say, around doing that. So I wrote some patents around doing that. But, I can't give away what's in my patents and what I do, but I tell you everything all around what's in my patents and what I do. So we've been talking about this for a long, long time, that nature can impact this endocannabinoid system, and that can help you fight disease, that can energize you, that can help you overcome things like autism, that can all kinds of miracle-like things, because those miracle-like things, people don't get autism in nature. You don't see an autistic deer. No, it doesn't happen, because they live closer to nature. They understand how to feed this system. Okay, so let's talk about that practically a little bit. Well, what does the system look like inside of us? Well, we've got these things called neuroreceptors. So most of us have heard about that. We have an opiate system that, is being impacted by fentanyl, and you hear about in the news every day. We have a serotonin system that's kind of our work system. So if you need to blink your eyes or cough or, talk or, do anything motor skill wise, serotonin is going to be involved and help regulate that activity. You have a dopamine system, and a dopamine system really has to do with our mind and kind of how our mind works, our emotionality, being able to control our mind and all that. But we have an endocannabinoid system that sits above and regulates all of those other systems. So how does it do it? Well, it does it through things called neuroreceptors. And so basically in your central nervous system, cells will express things called neuroreceptors. And these neuroreceptors are like little, I won't tell you what I'll tell you what science says that they are now. It'll get a little too woohoo to tell you what they really do. But let's say they're little like lock and key systems, okay? So they're like the lock will express on a cell, and then the key will be a neuroreceptor that will come along and basically turn that lock and create action within that cell. So that's how neurology works. That's how pharmacology works, which is really, really cool. And there's a lot more to it, obviously, than that, but at its basic level. So anyway, you have these things called CB1s that will express on every cell except a blood cell for some reason, but a red blood cell, which is a weird kind of different cell. But every single cell inside of you will pop up a CB1 neuroreceptor. Again, wouldn't it have to if the endocannabinoid system is your master regulatory system? So CB1s look to be our control surface. So in electronics, I'm an electrical engineer, so I kind of like to think about things electronically. So in electronics, it's like, sensor points, it's like control points. And you want a bunch of, surface area that you can kind of monitor and also control. And it looks like, again, not only every cell, but organelles inside of cells. So your endoplasmic reticulum, your mitochondria have CB1 neuroreceptors. So again, you need a lot of surface area to begin to control a lot of things within your body. And that's exactly what the CB1 neuroreceptor is. Now, interestingly, can you impact your ability? Let's say, can you impact these neuroreceptors inside of our body? Could we give ourselves more control surface and help ourselves by giving ourselves more control? Yeah. That's exactly what THC does. Now, sadly, it comes with some, happily, I guess, for some people, but sadly for some, it comes with some psychoactivity. So there's a little bit of a downside, but things like THCA, again, don't come with that psychoactivity. So impacting your THC neuroreceptor, your CB1 neuroreceptor, or causing your body to express more CB1 neuroreceptors helps you. It helps you with engineering. It helps you with, let's say, more control, more surface control. So it's going to give you more ability to control all different cells and surfaces in your body. So CB1s are very important. Understanding when and how they express is important, and then being able to impact them. So in a perfect world, I want to be able to cause you to express more CB1 neuroreceptors and then give you something that's going to help you impact those. So inside of you, you have a natural thing called anandamide. Anandamide was really is kind of the stake in the ground of the discovery of the endocannabinoid system. And it was discovered in 91 or 93. I never can remember. For some reason, those numbers get confused in my head. But it was discovered, let's say, in the early 90s. And it was discovered by the Meshulam group, to put it, not go down that rabbit hole, but it was discovered by the Meshulam group. That group decided to name that molecule. It's called AEA as well, but they decided to call it, and again, ethanolamide, blah, 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 big old long word, but they decided to call it anandamide. So your main control molecule in your body, an endocannabinoid, that's built from omega-6 fatty acids, by the way. So you don't build it from anything in marijuana. You build it from corn. But anandamide is your main control surface in the endocannabinoid system. And anandamide is what impacts the CB1 neuroreceptor and will cause you to do work. And again, the more anandamide you have, the more ability you have to do work. And the more CB1 neuroreceptors you have, the more ability you have to do work. So what does that mean? Quicker reaction, better, and quicker ways to deal with energy, status changes, emotionality, better abilities to be adaptive and plastic and emotionality and everything, right? So that's kind of where we want to be, right? We want to have a lot of CB1 neuroreceptors expressed, and we want to have a lot of things to express to basically impact those receptors. It's just like in a car, you want a bunch of sensor points and you want an ability to affect those sensor points and mechanisms of change as you discover things, and you want tighter control, let's say, over your vehicle. So that's exactly what happens with CB1 in the endocannabinoid system. Now, coolly, you can impact CB1 neuroreceptors. So there are, things in nature that will supplement the endocannabinoid system and help with CB1. What are those things? Well, cannabis obviously is one. There's stuff, and it's hard to find CB1 effectors in nature. No joke. I spent 10 years looking for CB1 effectors in nature. And there's some, there's some in common stuff. There's CB1 effectors in kava. There's CB1 effectors that are dietary fats, let's say. So there are CB1 effectors around, but when you go to plants in nature, it's kind of, they're not like obvious and everywhere. You have to work, but the thing that is common across the world is cannabis. So you can always affect a CB1 neuroreceptor with cannabis. Now, there's other ways to affect the receptor. And basically when let's say a lock goes into a key, there's a timing mechanism there. So that reaction will only stay active for so long. And in the endocannabinoid system, you have something called hydrolase. And so at CB1, you have something called fatty acid amyl hydrolase. And it'll come along, whoop, and every once in a while, basically sweep out that key and open that lock back up to other action. And so that's important in your body. You've got to be able to control a reaction. And that's one of the ways that you control the reaction. FA at CB1, fatty acid amyl hydrolase, is what controls the reaction at CB1. And again, that's part of your endocannabinoid system and the way that you shut down those reactions. So you're controlling surface area, but you also need a way to kind of calm all that down. And FA is a way to do that. Now, in nature, it's really cool. There are lots of FA inhibitors. Red clover is a FA inhibitor. There are just maca is a FA inhibitor. There's just tons of FA inhibitors in nature, which is really cool because, again, generally, we've got enough anandamide. We've got enough control in our endocannabinoid system to do what we need to do. It's sometimes we need to calm that sucker down. So if you look at people who are immunocompromised, so people who are having too strong of an immune reaction, that is endocannabinoid related. And again, that can somewhat be calmed down by FA and some other things. Immune is more CB2, which we're going to talk about right now. So you also have a whole nother side of this endocannabinoid system that's controlled by another receptor called CB2. And CB2 naturally is impacted by something called 2-arachnoglic. I don't know if he's an acid or not. 2-arachnoglic. Yeah, 2AG. So 2AG is what he is in the literature. So 2AG is what we'll call him. But 2AG is your natural, what they call ligand. So your natural key at the lock that is CB2. Okay. So most cells, again, will express a CB2 neuroreceptor, but it's most common in the immune system. So your immune system is the main point. Let's say your peripheral nervous system is the main point where CB2 neuroreceptors are. So you kind of have this master critical control, and then you kind of have this ancillary accessory system control. And the accessory system control seems to be more related to the CB2 neuroreceptor. And again, 2-arachnoglic acid. Now, the really cool thing about CB2 in nature, there's tons of stuff in nature that affects the CB2 neuroreceptor, but in particular, beta-caryophyllene. And again, this is something that we have patented, but, yeah, I'll just leave it there. Beta-caryophyllene will strongly affect the CB2 neuroreceptor and is a good medicine. So, and it occurs everywhere in nature. So many things that you hear about are beneficial, like black seed, black cumin, black seed oil. Its main thing is beta-caryophyllene. So the reason why it's so effective at immune type stuff is beta-caryophyllene, which is impacting the endocannabinoid system at CB2. Many things. So black pepper has beta-caryophyllene in it. So beta-caryophyllene is something that's very, very common and is a stronger modulator at CB2 than anything in cannabis. Okay. So if I was looking for stuff in nature for your immune system to really help you bolster your immune system, I wouldn't go to cannabis first. I'd go to the pepper plant. I'd go to pepper. I'd go to beta-caryophyllene and pepperine that are in, black pepper, which is a very, very common, plant. So that's kind of, and again, you have the same situation at CB2 where you've got this uptake kind of control, and it's called MAGL. I won't even try to pronounce all the words together, but it's abbreviated MAGL. And so we just call it MAGL. And in some cases, DAGL. So mono or di is the D or M difference there, just depending on the hydrolase. But it's another hydrolase that basically will clean out that receptor and kind of reset that receptor. Okay, well, let's see what else we want to talk about here. So the endocannabinoid system is really involved in our homeostasis. So you want to be a balanced vehicle, right? Just like when we're driving our car, we want the right combination of gas and oxygen in our carburetor. We want the right, consumption of oil to lubricate the engine. We want, the right output of carbons. We want the right temperature inside the car. We want to, balance all that in the proper ways. And we've got lots of mechanisms in our vehicle that help us do that. Well, again, inside of you, just like your car, you have this endocannabinoid system that helps you balance and manage all of these other systems that you have to run. And think about all these systems that you have to run. You have to run an immune system. You have to run a energy balance system. You have to, metabolic system, if you will. You have to run how you respond to emotionality system. So we have all these systems that we have to run. And again, the endocannabinoid systems helps us balance and manage our resources and kind of resources that are needed to tweak and manage these different systems. So super important that we feed and balance this system. Well, again, we'll talk more about how to do that with diet and, behavior in other chip talks. And we're going to dive deep into this. We're going to literally kind of strip the bark off the endocannabinoid system. But for right now, we'll leave it here. Now, what can you do, let's say, to monitor the health of this system? Well, this is stuff, again, that we've done through our kind of clinic, let's say, practices. So we have something called bioresonance that really helps us have a look at you and kind of see how you're performing around this system. And then really every single product that we have in TruMedics is a endocannabinoid affecting product. I mean, that's what our patents are around. That's what we do. That's what I specialize in. So when I'm trying to, let's say, design a product to do something, I'm looking at the endocannabinoid system and how the endocannabinoid system is working in that area. Boy, and obesity is a huge one that really can be solved with the endocannabinoid system. So we have a product right now called Fast in TruMedics that is built around all these principles that we're learning about how the endocannabinoid system manages hunger and then other factors that get involved. You're not a single organism. You have a microbiome that's really competing with, it's helping you maybe in certain ways, but it's also competing with you for resources, and it's altering your natural processes. It has to stay alive. So in some cases that's good, in some cases that's bad, but it's something you got to be aware of when you're trying to help someone. You have to be aware of everything inside of you as a machine. And so the endocannabinoid system kind of helps us do that and helps us do a better understanding. So check out products in TruMedics, because the products in TruMedics are affecting this larger system, which will help you specifically in the areas that we're trying to kind of help you with. And come see us at Neighborly Wellness. We have ways to really monitor the health of this system. And that's what we're trying to do, is help you in a bigger and broader way. We'll leave it there for now. And we'll be back next Friday with another exciting version of Chip Talks, where we'll dive deeper into the endocannabinoid system. See you guys. Bye.